The issue of justice in this country is a subject that paints a bleak picture of the country. We have so many emblematic cases where people have struggled for justice for decades on end and are still struggling for justice. And that's not a good thing to say, but that is a fact. If I start listing out names of such persons, it's a long, long list. And most of the time, it is due to the fact that there is political interference into the affairs of the judiciary. There is a book written by three authors, Jayantha Almeida Gunratna, Kishali Pinto Jayawardena, and Gehan Gunatilaka, called The Judicial Mind in Sri Lanka, Responding to the Protection of Minority Rights, published by Law and Society Trust in January 2014, which is very revealing as to the judicial attitudes, particularly towards the minority. And in this, they start from the very beginning, when the Citizenship Act was passed, and the case of Mudannayaka versus Kodakanpilla versus Mudannayaka, and then Kodiswaran case, etc., and come down until recent times, when issues of minority people's rights have been dealt with very differently to that of other cases. We saw a recent phenomenon when the Honorable Minister of Justice himself, in desperation, tweeted. I mean, all he could do was to tweet about the burial rights of the Muslims in Sri Lanka. To no avail, Honorable Minister, because even that matter was summarily dismissed, albeit by a majority decision. At least one judge agreed that there was something to look into, but no reasons given yet again. Very serious issues have been summarily dealt with like that. There are other cases where not even investigations have been done. Now, I can cite the Valikada massacre of 1983. Was anyone punished for that? No. When people who are in state custody get killed in custody, surely people can be held responsible. Now this has happened now from Valikada in 1983 to Mahara a few days ago. This is happening. That's not a good thing. Yeah. Bindunuweva in 2000, 27 people were killed. Vaunia prison in July 2012, where Nimala Ruban and Dilrukshan were killed. I can list out a whole list of names. Yeah, Kalutara. But the point is, no, I'm talking about custodial deaths. I'm talking about custodial deaths of a government that calls itself a democratic government, a government that says that you have the best judicial system in the country. How can custodial deaths go unpunished? I'm not saying that it happened. It shouldn't happen. But even when it happens, it goes unpunished. That's the greatest slur to a justice system of any country. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, the soul of a nation is judged by how you treat your prisoners. How are prisoners treated? I mean, the Vaunia case that I mentioned, Nimala Ruban and Dilrukshan, they were held there on suspicion. Young men, they were beaten to death. Several of their limbs, there were several fractures in their limbs when they were beaten. There were fundamental rights cases filed in respect of Nimala Ruban. Leave to proceed was refused by a person who occupied the office of Chief Justice and had to then leave that post. Now you have made him permanent representative to the UN. You can't find a better person. He made comments from the bench that is recorded in the published works by several organizations, even this book that I mentioned, that should never have come from any judge. Now, Kumarapuram, now I am going to areas where there are, it wasn't custodial deaths, but nevertheless, large numbers of people were killed. 24 were killed in Kumarapuram. Mirusuvil, a few people were killed. One person was punished, but he was recently pardoned. What's the message? What's the message that the country gives? Even in the rarest of rare cases, where you want to show that something is happening and there is a conviction in the original court, either the appeal court releases the people, or even if that doesn't happen, there is an executive pardon given.
His Excellency spoke of sovereignty, and that under no circumstances will he allow the sovereignty of the country to be compromised. That is correct. For a president to make that statement, that might be correct. But what he must also realize is that when it comes to international relations, sovereignty comes with certain baggage. One of the most cornerstone principles on which sovereignty will be compromised is if within the country the state does not protect its own citizens, or even worse, if within the country the state attacks its own citizens. Sovereignty can never be a defense. This country has gone through a war. The whole world says that heinous crimes have been committed, and the state is the #1 accused party. Without accountability and being prepared to address those issues, you can never. This is not a point of order. Please sit. You can speak when your turn comes.
Sarath Veerasekara.
And experts have said that there's no war crimes have been committed. So he's lying in this chamber. He's lying in this chamber.
This is not a point of order.
Take the time out of his. So therefore, under no circumstances can any president or any country for that matter try to hide behind the concept of sovereignty to prevent accountability for heinous crimes. The victims of these heinous crimes stand as Tamils. The major victims stand as Tamils, and they have consistently said that genocide has been committed and that they want international accountability.
Your time is up.
Finally, Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, there are certain very welcome concepts which His Excellency has drawn with regards to development and certain other issues. I would like to flag two. One is with regards to foreign fishermen fishing in Sri Lankan waters. Second, he has also talked of several landless people have to be given their deeds. I welcome those, but what His Excellency must understand is that the Northeast has been a war zone for over 30 years. The people of the Northeast...
You have to wrap it up.
I'm finishing. The people of the Northeast economy is 30 years lagging behind. You cannot treat people in the Northeast equally. You have to protect them. You have to allow their economy to grow. And it is only thereafter that you can allow...
This is the month of November, in which I said some time ago also, all those who died in wars are remembered. That is why we sell poppy it's world over. This is the period in which that happens. And in Sri Lanka, particularly in the Tamil areas, for the last 3 decades, it has become a custom to remember the dead who fought the war. They may have fought the state, but nevertheless, they are dead, and their families and others have a right to remember them, as they are accustomed to do. The government has taken great exception to this now, suddenly this year, and is flying members of the Attorney General's Department by special helicopters to Jaffna, to Mullaitivu, all over the place. Amid COVID restrictions, when the Attorney General's Department is in an isolated zone, they are flying around all over without being quarantined to oppose and to obtain orders from magistrates preventing mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers remembering the dead.
Honourable Member, your
Now,
time is up. Please wind up.
Most unfortunate, yeah, I'm winding up. Most unfortunate, this, okay,
இன்னும் 5 நிமிஷம் கொடுக்கலாம் அடைக்கலாம் அந்த டைம் லைன்.
From Adaikalnathan's time, I'll take 5 more minutes. Most unfortunate, most undignified act by the state. Honoring the dead, remembering the dead is, even in our culture, a solemn affair. To be chasing after people. The other day, I stood with a mother, 83 years old. She has only a shack for a house. Her son died in 1985. And as she lit her lamp, I participated in that event. A solemn occasion. Why are you so worried? Why are you so scared of the dead? Is it because you put them to death in the most brutal manner, violating all the international norms? The other thing is, sovereignty is for all the people. Sovereignty is not to be enjoyed by the majority only. And that must be kept in mind. If the majority only enjoys sovereignty, then you're leaving the other peoples out. You're forcing them to claim their own sovereignty. And that would be your own act. The foreign minister, when he started, he said he wants to give a lesson.
Shame on this government. Just, we don't want to be a Chinese colony. In this country, Muslims are going to court, Catholics are going to asking for justice, Tamils for asking, get your people in order. Leader of the House, get your people in order. These are not MPs. Who are these fellows? You have brought them here just to do this. Let them make a point in Parliament. Right? And then behave yourself, and what is the language that you use? In conclusion, it is behavior like this that strengthens us. It's behavior like this that strengthens us. Thank you. When you all behave like this, it strengthens our cause. It strengthens our cause. Stop waging about the war. Stop harping about the war. War was finished 11 years ago. Ganna hama kehel malagana yuddha dinapu nayakaya. Yuddha ivara kara. Right? 75 years. I don't know how much time I have left with all this. Let me finish this. So anyway, I wanted to say more things, but then I've been disturbed like this. But it has been, yesterday, when we spoke, the day before yesterday, Honorable G.G. Ponnambalam said something very important. He said, you might succeed one day in completely destroying us, right, if you keep going at this pace. But I'd like to tell you something. It's taken 72 years, and you still haven't been able to destroy our voices, right? Even if it takes another 75 years, you all will not be able to destroy our voices, right? What you all will destroy is you all will destroy this country. This country will go back. We will all get destroyed. Come, let's join hands in getting destroyed, if that's what you want. You want to get destroyed? Let's join hands. Worry about the Chinese. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about us. Worry about the Chinese, because you've been hitting us so hard. I actually like to say something that my grandfather said in this parliament in 1969. in July 25th of July 1969. He has said, Mr. Speaker, I'm ashamed that 70 years later this speech is still relevant. Mr. Speaker, my late grandfather was the leader of the Federal Party at one point. He was a member of Parliament from 52 to 70, and he has said this in the Parliament in 1969. Mr. Speaker, I'll finish this within 1 minute. I'll finish. Mr. Speaker, the Federal Party has existed for more than 20 years. Our objective, our ideal, our goal. Our scientific theory has been that this country should have a federal form of government. Now, why do we say that? We are supposed to have a democratic form of government. Democracy is one of the very loose words that is used for a concept and a form of government which sometimes exists and sometimes does not exist in the theoretical form. So I don't want to repeat the whole thing. I don't want to repeat the whole thing, but this speech is still very relevant after 70 years. I will finish up. I will finish up in one last saying.
No.
You know, with one last saying. You know, hatred cannot be removed by hatred. Hatred cannot be removed by hatred. Love. You guys boast that this is a Sinhala Buddhist country. You all can't even allow us Tamil man to speak. Sinhala Buddhist country, you have to love people, not disturb people like this. If you're a Sinhala Buddhist country, if you're a Buddhist, first if you're a Buddhist, learn to respect human beings. Learn to respect human beings. Thank you. This is all nonsense. This is all nonsense. There is no issue in this country. You all are creating an issue. Because you're not able to manage this country, you're creating issues. This is how Zaharan happened. I'll tell you, you're pointing fingers at Muslim politicians and innocent Muslims in this country. How did Zaharan happen? Zaharan happened because you all created Zaharan. This, I don't know which government, one of the governments created Zaharan. Alutgam attack. I read one of the investigations. Are East attack eකට සම්බන්ධ වෙච්ච එක ළමයෙක් කියලා තියෙනවා. එයා අලුත්ගම attack එකෙන් පස්සේ තමයි යාගේ හිත වෙනස් වුනේ කියලා. You keep attacking the minorities like this, what is going to happen? Naturally they are going to react in some way. Maybe they were exploited by some other force. Naturally someone is going to use them. So Alutgama incident, why was that created? Who created that? Then look at the issues after that. Vanda peti තියනවා කිව්වා. I'll talk to them later. Vanda peti තියනවා කියලා කිව්වා. I mean, what is this? Doctors are, you're creating unnecessary unrest in this country to cover up your inabilities. Now look at what's happening. I mean, you know, the Honorable Minister was talking about people who should be ashamed, right? I am ashamed as a Sri Lankan today. Look at the Muslims. I mean, what are they asking for? They are asking for their last rites. They are asking for their janazas to be buried. You know, these innocent Muslim people, they live all their lives according to the Quran. And right towards the end, their last right, you're taking it away for politics. You all should be ashamed. I'm ashamed. And I'm ashamed of all the Muslim politicians who supported this government for the 20th Amendment. இந்த இடத்தில் கிழக்கு மாகாணத்தை சேர்ந்த ஒரே ஒரு பாராளுமன்ற உறுப்பினர் மட்டும்தான் இஸ்லாமிய பாராளுமன்ற உறுப்பினர் இந்த அரசாங்கத்துக்கு 20ஆம் திருச்சட்டத்துக்கு ஆதரவு அளிக்காத. இந்த பாராளுமன்றத்தில் இருக்கும் அனைத்து கிழக்கு மாகாணத்தை சேர்ந்த இலங்கையில் இருக்கும் அனைத்து இஸ்லாமிய பாராளுமன்ற உறுப்பினரை பார்க்க அவமானமாக இருக்கு. என்றால் உங்களுடைய மக்களுடைய அந்த இறுதி சடங்கை செய்யறது கூட அனுமதி அளிக்காத ஒரு அரசாங்கத்தை நீங்க ஆதரவு அளித்திருக்கீங்க. People are going to courts. Minorities are going for courts. Why? What are they going to courts for? For their basic rights. They are going to courts. They are going to courts because you're not letting them bury their bodies. Tamil people are going to courts for fundamental rights. I went to courts in Batiklo. Why? Because there's a mother who wants to light up a lamp in remembrance of her son. A father wants to light up a lamp in remembrance of his son. For you all maybe it's LTT. For me, for him, for us, it's a different thing. But for a mother, the son is a son. He's not part of, for her it doesn't matter if it's LTT or what. Son. Mama miniyak marala giyat mang hitanne mage ammata mage ammage man puta. Mama LTT නෙවෙයි. You know, why can't you respect that? Tamils are going to courts to remember the dead. Muslims are going to court to bury their dead. Look at the Catholic community in this country. We have so many debates about the Catholic cardinal now. Cardinal is begging for right justice to be done to his dead. So this is the point this country has come to. We should be ashamed.
In May 2009, the date was the 16th, I was approached by the LTT's political head, at that time Mr. Nadesan, and Mr. Pulithavan, who was in charge of the Peace Secretariat, to approach the government of the day. There were nearly 150,000 to 100,000 people in LTT controlled areas on the 16th of May 2009. And the LTT's position was that if the government was not approached and if the LTT's wish to save those lives of civilians was not expressed and conveyed, those lives will be lost. And on that basis, I contacted the then Minister, Mr. Basil Rajapaksa, on numerous occasions on the 16th from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon till about 10 in the night. I think we must have discussed 10 times the modalities with regards to how those civilians could be brought across. Eventually, with the Defence Ministry consultation, it was agreed around 8 o'clock in the night that Mr. Basil Rajapaksa and myself will personally go to Vanni along with 2 bishops that the government and we will agree upon, who will oversee the whole process by which these civilians will come across. And this agreement was reached at about 8 o'clock on the 16th, pending the Security Council approval, which was to take place on the next day, because His Excellency President Mahinda Rajapaksa was away in Jordan for the non-aligned movement meeting, and he was only returning on the 17th morning. When he was to return, he was supposed to go into a National Security Council meeting immediately, and approval was supposed to be sought, and we were to be ready to go to Vanni to ensure that those civilians be brought across. Now, it was 150,000 to 100, and I make those large numbers. There is a discrepancy of nearly 50,000 because it was almost impossible to give a safe number. But those numbers were massive by any stretch of imagination. By any stretch of imagination. And at about 11 o'clock, after the National Security Council meeting had started, at about 11 o'clock when I was looking at the TV, the government's channels, Rupavahini and ITN, announced that all civilians had been brought across. About 50,000 civilians had come across, and that there was no more civilians in LTT-controlled areas. I panicked, because I know that when the war started in LTT-controlled areas, there were over 460,000 civilians. These were government figures. And gradually, from people coming out, as well as deaths, the calculations made by not only the TNA, but all other responsible institutions that were monitoring the war, knew that the numbers, even at the very end, were large. The Honorable Sarath Veerasekara the other day asked, where was I? That was my job. I was a member of parliament at that time, and I was trying to, in some way, use my privileges as a member of parliament and my contacts with the government to try and safeguard those civilians. The LTT was willing to allow them to be brought across. But that did not happen. That did not happen. From the inception of the war, please don't disturb, Honorable Minister,
Honorable Leader of the House responded to Honorable Taratha Athukorala about Honorable Sivanesathura Chandrakanthan's case and said 4.5 years he was in remand. 4.5 years. He thought that was a long time. I do concede 4.5 years in remand is a long time. But what about the Tamil political prisoners? He used that word. He said Deshapalana Sirakaruwak lesa salakanwada kila aywa. What has happened to the actual Tamil political prisoners? I'm not talking about Sivanesathura Chandrakanthan, who is accused of murdering Tamil National Alliance parliamentarian Joseph Parrajasingam on the 24th December night when he was attending Mass in the Batticlaw Cathedral. But what about the actual political prisoners. How long have they been in remand? Why are you not rising for the rights of those persons? They have been in remand for 20 years, 25 years, some over 30 years. Now why can't they be released? Why doesn't the Honorable Attorney General consent to bail in that case? Why does he consent to bail to only Sivanesa Chandrakanthan under PTA? In one case, the AG takes a position that he can consent to bail. In another case, he says, no, under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, under Section 7(1) proviso, in the High Court, I have no discretion to consent to bail. Why these double standards? I am talking about double standards in all of these cases. What about the Trinco 5? What about the Trinco 5? You gave assurance after assurance after assurance to various international fora. No justice for those 5 students. What about the Muthur ACF workers, 17 of them? What about the 11 youth who were abducted in Colombo? Where is justice for all of that? I mentioned Joseph Parajasingam. What about Raviraj? What about Sivanesan? 3 honorable MPs of this house murdered while they were sitting MPs. Raviraj's case came up before the High Court in Colombo before a Sinhala-speaking jury. Under the PTA, there is no jury trial. But he was charged for murder as well under the penal code just to enable a jury trial. And after a long trial, they were acquitted. The Attorney General has appealed. And the persons who were accused and arraigned as accused in the High Court were persons who were naval intelligence officers. The Attorney General himself indicted them. So, the involvement of the state, and particularly that of the intelligence component of the state, was admittedly conceded by the Honorable Attorney General himself.
It says on page 3, it is equally important to precisely interpret the mandate given by the people. He goes on to say in that paragraph, we have a clear understanding of the expectations with which the people gave us such a powerful mandate to the government. We will leave no room for such expectations to be dashed for any reason. Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, whilst His Excellency the President is correct in interpreting that mandate for his party, it will not be correct for him to say that that mandate extends to the north and east. In the northeast, the mandate that was given unanimously, and I say unanimously with you seated on the chair as well, was for Tamil rights to be recognized. Tamil rights means that our identity has to be recognized. That Sri Lanka is a plurinational country, that there are 2 nations that exist in this country, and that our rights have to be equal, our status has to be equal, and that along with that status, constitutional amendments have to be made recognizing the right to self-determination, was unanimously expressed in the last elections in the north and the east. Your good self, after winning, when you thanked the people, you made it a point to say in your speeches that you are not opposed to Tamil rights. On the contrary, you are consistent with Tamil rights, but we can't wait till Tamil rights are achieved for development to take place, and that was your role, to intervene for development. Honorable Douglas Devananda, leader of the EPDP, in his campaign, his posters spoke of Tamilar Thesam Thale Nimira, for the Tamil nation to rise. That was his slogan. So the fact that we are a nation was unanimous in the Northeast. That mandate cannot be violated. That is a mandate that has been consistently given by the Tamil people right through the 72-year history of this country.
Why is the judicial arm of the state like this? And it is because of this that we have consistently said that we have no confidence in the judiciary. Are we to be blamed? Are we to be blamed? When you yourself trade allegations against each other, just hours ago, you did that. How are we to be blamed when we are always, almost always, at the butt end of justice? So that is why, in respect of serious crimes that have been committed in this country, that is why, in respect of international crimes that have been committed in this country, we have asked for international involvement, international inquiry, international judicial processes. How can you deny that? How can you say no when we can lay bare before you, not only we, you yourself did that a little while ago. You laid before the entire world depths to which your judicial system had sunk. You were, so vociferous. You thought you were accusing the other side, but you were in fact accusing the judiciary. And as I said, justifiably so. Take some recent examples. And I want to pick one example of a colleague of mine, Hijaz Hizbullah, a brilliant lawyer. Honorable Minister of Justice knows that very well. A brilliant young lawyer denied justice for 8 months. What are you doing for 8 months? If you had evidence that he was involved in anything at all, you could have charged him with that. What are you doing for 8 months? All kinds of false allegations were made against him. When his house was searched and he was arrested, Honorable Minister, they took away 2 of his case briefs. Not even in a court of law can questions be asked with regard to communication between client and attorney, and you know that very well. There are only 2 instances of privilege, one husband-wife and the other is attorney-client privilege. That's how sacrosanct communication between a lawyer and his client is. But they took even his client's files. Can't he have clients? Can't he handle cases for people who are later found to have committed other crimes? Is a lawyer to be blamed? All right, even if you did that, in those files, if you found anything, you could have brought that to light. You could have produced him before court. Nothing. Nothing to date. All kinds of spurious allegations are being made. Something about a school, that he was involved in some school. Now that school is still functioning. Nobody else has been arrested in respect of that school. That school is functioning. Everybody is happily running that school. But he is detained for involvement in that school. I mean, funny state of affairs. Funny ministry. He was said to have got assistance from Qatar Charity. Now Qatar Charity is still running. Is still involved. State is beneficiary as well. No, so what is wrong with Qatar Charity? If you can have it, you can still use it. You accuse him of being involved with Qatar Charity. There is not an iota of it. I have not spoken about Hijaz Hizbullah until today. For good reason. If there was something against him and there were investigations, let the investigators be free to find evidence against him. But after 8 months, his wife just gave birth to a child. He hasn't been able to even see his wife. Access to lawyers have been denied. I know you will say it was given sketchily here and there, given with a police officer sitting there and writing down every word that is spoken. Is that, I mean, you are a trained lawyer, right? Is that access? I'm picking one case, one emblematic case to show how many thousands more are suffering like this. I'm picking that case because he's a lawyer. If you treat a lawyer like that, how do we expect you to treat anybody else any better? A lawyer who is well known, a lawyer who is regarded as a brilliant advocate in our courts, is being treated like this.
I start my felicitations, Honourable Speaker, hailing you in my mother tongue, the oldest living language of this world, and the language of the first indigenous inhabitants of this country, and proceed in the link language. I thank Your Honour for accepting such a high position in our parliamentary tradition. I am sure Your Honour would bring with your high office your experience with men and matters gained throughout your long political career. We have a very powerful government now. A similar government was constituted under the late J.R. Jawadana in 1977. It was during that regime that we had the 1983 program. Certainly this government too could follow the path of the elephant of that time and end up as today reduced to a single member in the future. But I'm sure they would not. They would prefer to learn from our mistakes of the past and usher in a period of peace and prosperity where all communities would feel equal to each other and walk with dignity and pride as children of Mother Lanka. That freedom and equality could dawn only if we shed the false historical perspectives of the past and recognize the intrinsic rights of the people living in the north and east of Sri Lanka, who are entitled to the right of self-determination as per Article 1 of Chapter 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, in addition to their hereditary and traditional right to be recognized as a nation. Sir, I hope we would not be called upon in this August Assembly of Parliamentarians in the future during your Honour's term of office for your protective assistance, since we would respect each other's rights and our duties towards each other. But we are sure you will guide us all without fear or favour if any such impasse comes to pass. But there is no need, sir, in a country which professes Buddhism, to expect a hegemonic dominance from anyone, since we have not forgotten what the Sinhala villager is only too well familiar with, that every act has its opposite reaction. Kala kala de pala pala ve. Stuti Garu Sabana Ekatumani.